So talk to me about how you got into project management. What was your kind of thought process?
So I found project management to be a sort of natural evolution from where I started. So I was part of the graduate scheme at Atlas Copco, or Edwards as it was called then, as a mechanical engineering graduate. And I got to the point where I'd perhaps done as much as I could do within that function as I saw it. But then I had a bit of a choice to make. Do I go further down a more specialized route and perhaps become a functional leader within product engineering or manufacturing engineering, or do I take a bit of a pivot and try and broaden out and get a wider influence? And I chose the latter because I just found it more interesting. I was never really interested in staying in my function. I was a bit nosy and wanted to probe and prod around and overstep boundaries and learn more about how everything works at a sort of a system level rather than just purely in my little area. And project management was the vehicle that allowed me to do that. So as Atlas Copco set up a specialist program management office, I applied for an internal vacancy there, and that allowed me to step up and into that area.
So what experiences did you have in your first project management role?
My first role, I had bits and pieces along the way within my function, kind of Six Sigma continuous improvement projects, and then being the functional leader on the product development of another project that someone's running. So I had little bits and pieces, but then my first proper project was a new product introduction of a turbomolecular vacuum pump, which we developed in the UK, and then we took it to be manufactured in the Czech Republic. So yeah, very much front end research and development and early stage designing and testing the UK, and then manufacturing and a handover and prove out and sign off over in the factory in the Czech Republic. So it was cross-functional, it was cross-discipline, it was cross-country. Yeah, really interesting work to be involved with.
And so did you do any qualifications or extra kind of training on top of your degree, or was most of it hands-on?
I did my degree before I started the graduate scheme, and then did a master's in manufacturing engineering that led me down the functional route to start with. But for project management, I thought the best thing to do would be at least get some form of project management qualification as it would be a barrier to entry in my mind. Without it, you've got to know what you're talking about, and therefore I did the Prince 2 course on a self-funded basis, because Atlas Copco wasn't a Prince 2 company, but I just saw it as a good way to get up to speed with the basics. And some of those ideas from Prince 2 I brought into Atlas Copco as best practices, but we weren't a full Prince company. So I did Prince 2 to start with, and then when I was at Ricardo, they were trying to increase the overall level of maybe you might say project management professionalism in the business. So they made it mandatory that everyone had to complete the APMP course. So we as a group all had to get studying and pass that course together. And what else have I done? The final bit I did was, as I went from projects to programs, I thought that was a different skill set as well. If you define projects as being a particular change initiative with a start and end point, whereas programs being a collection of projects, different skill set. So I did the successor to Prince 2 called MSP, Managing Successful Programs, and they all taught me different things and all complementary, I would say. when you look at the whole thing, look at as a whole your project management career. So I definitely recommend project management qualifications to supplement your on-the-job experience. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What was out of those qualifications? Is there kind of one thing that you would highlight as being really valuable and that you've implemented and used across your programs and projects initially, the ones that you did before your program management?
I think from Prince 2 that it's quite purist and it's very rigorous in perhaps the approach to say risk management, and being very clear on the difference between risks and issues, making sure you're not blending the two things together. They are very different. And also the idea that as a project manager, if you find a number of your risks end up on your issue register, then you're probably not so good at looking at risk. Either they appeared as an issue because you didn't get your risk assessment right, or you completely missed it on your risk register and it just appeared straight as an issue. So I think that's one of the things that I really think about quite a lot. Have I really accurately defined my risks? And then a bit of a personal reflection around, oh, this issue register is looking a bit long. Maybe I'm not so good at risk.
Okay. And what about your further qualification that you did to top it up? Is there anything that you would highlight that was a really good learn for you on that course?
I think, or just for APMP, what I liked about it, which is my one in the middle, I found the wider notion of what a project leader is as opposed to a project manager. I really liked that it talked more widely about the skill set. But with MSP, I think it talks a lot about the what you don't think of as perhaps programs as much, maybe the Olympics or big behavioural change programs. It just opened my eyes to really what project and program management is or could be, and how do you make sure you're working on perhaps the changing hearts and minds side of things. And you never really talk about that too much in Prince, a little bit in APMP, but certainly more of a bias up at the program management level when you're initiating change.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you, Leigh. And what sort of challenges have you faced in your career?
I think the biggest challenge so far was when I joined Jaguar Land Rover, because there's a bit of a cliche, I think, in project management, or a question that often gets asked around, can you lead programs or projects that you know nothing about? Perhaps an idea that you could bounce between the nuclear industry to retail to automotive, and it's all really the same thing if you know the project management fundamentals. And that's exactly the position I was in, because I developed products for the semiconductor industry and for the scientific instrument industry. I'd then gone to Ricardo, and we were in power generation and very small amounts of automotive. But then suddenly I was into Jaguar Land Rover, and there's no way they recruited me for my knowledge of developing and launching cars. I simply didn't have any. So I found joining JLR at a senior manager level without the 12 years of experience I had at Atlas Copco was really tough. And it was tough because I didn't have the relationships within the business. I didn't have just those years of experience of solving these problems before. Everything was new. So I think my reflection on that was that it absolutely can be done. It's just that it's harder, and you probably when you join, you're a bit like the office or project manager who can talk about the tools, but you don't have that that core of the industry within you. you can't accept that as being okay. You can accept it as okay during your onboarding period and maybe 1 to 2 years afterwards, but in the end, if you're going to be the best project leader you can be, then it's really important to start getting passionate about the industry and getting a few iterations through the project management cycle in the industry that you're in.
That's really interesting, because I often think that, project management is project management. Why is it that people end up in very strict verticals with project management rather than having that fluidity across? Because I think you can, but as you've just raised, there are very steep learning curves and challenges about, at least you came from an engineering background. If someone had come into that role, I don't think it would have been possible to come into that role without at least some form of manufacturing understanding and engineering understanding into the project management role. So it's just really interesting, as I get deeper and deeper into project management, how people really do. They might start off in their beginning career as junior project managers, but they definitely, as they go into their careers, carve out a vertical market where they remain all the way through. Even if it changes, their role changes slightly, the vertical, the kind of subject matter, with you engineering remains the same.
Absolutely.
And I think businesses look for that as well. I think the clients that I work with, if they're a manufacturing engineering organisation, they would look for your kind of skills and experience. And if they were on the digital side or the IT side, they would be looking for that specific knowledge in that industry, because I guess they run projects slightly differently as well. Although the project management skill set is the same, they're running projects differently. Like, for example, the engineering projects are very much longer, whereas some of the digital projects that my digital clients run are like, short and sharp and really fast and furious. And, it's like months rather than years. So, it is really interesting, even though you have the same qualifications, skill sets, soft skills that someone else in a different industry would have. So it is really, I find it fascinating.
I think that's good what you said about soft skills, actually, because that's, I think in the beginning, that's all you've got to compete with. You when you've joined a level, you don't know the industry, as I said, you don't know the relationship. So it's critically important that project managers don't just run the tools and spit out the answer. You have to have developed your soft skills as a holding pattern until you can catch up, perhaps that, if you call them, the harder skills in that particular industry. And I don't know if all project managers see it that way or put the right amount of emphasis between the two, but certainly if you're considering moving between industries, it's important to have a good soft skill set that you're going to leverage at the beginning.
I think what I've noticed with most project managers and program managers that I speak to is that you're all very personable. So one of the main core soft skills, I would say, is your ability to talk to people at any level on any subject. Even if your hard skill knowledge isn't there, you're able to curiously find out, what information you need to know. So that's, as an outside person looking in, who's not a project manager, but is dealing with project managers and program managers, daily and looking at jobs for them, it's really interesting to see that is one of the things I would say that I think you would need. If someone said to me, how do you become a good project manager? I would say, well, do you have the skills to talk to people and be curious? And then you've got a good starting platform to build something on, or to build a career on. Curiosity
is a good word as well, because that's not easily trainable, is it?
It's not trainable at all. You've got to be, and I think that's a key in my profession as well, is that, having that curiosity to kind of find out about companies and dig deep and find out about people. I think when you're in a career or profession that involves collaboration and getting people on board together, it's crucial, because, if you're not that interested or not that bothered, and you're just wanting to get the job done, sometimes you miss detail that could transform your project or your program, or in my case, my, I mean, I run jobs like projects anyway, so it's, it transforms them into something completely different and more satisfying and better end. You get a better end product, I think, or service, or whatever you're aiming for. Who's inspired you and influenced you during your career, Leigh?
I think I started off, as I say, in Atlas Copco, and it was the people around me. I worked, having reflected on it, I worked with some really, really good people at Atlas Copco. I'll drop some names, but there was a guy called Pete Jones who taught me how to be a good engineer. So that got me started. And then I worked up into a sort of a manufacturing section head role. A guy called Tony Murphy, who used to be at Atlas Copco, he's now independent as a consultant. He taught me a lot about people management and how to treat a team, how to lead a team. Then from there, I went into the project management role, and Ian Keach, who's the vice president of scientific instruments, I think his title is now, at Atlas, he taught me so much about leadership, about creating a challenge, a proactively challenging mindset, and again a bit more about how to lead people. And all the while I had a mentor there, Ian Stones, who's the director of technology, who was just inspirational in every possible way. His work ethic, his ability, his professionalism, and I think once I left Atlas Copco, I became a little bit more self-sufficient, and sought my own mentors from external sources. I've always have, but I did even more reading and listening to perhaps leadership authors and self-development authors. David Marquet is a leadership guru, but just probably the best of his kind in my opinion. Also, some sports leadership authors. Like I said, personal development, about training your mind. More recently, I've started to look at sort of celebrity or political biographies, because I think you can learn a set of tools from a leadership author, but then you started to think about how perhaps big political historical figures think. So I've read Michelle Obama's book. I'm listening to Barack Obama's current book that he's just released, and then some of his back catalogue. So I'm trying to get inspiration from people like that these days, as opposed to learning ever more tools. It's more about the mindset that these people have. And yeah, every car journey is Audible is on. And every night before bed is as many pages as I can handle, without falling asleep on a long line of books.
What's your favourite?
Definitely Turn the Ship Around, from a leadership with David Marquet, leadership style. I'm really enjoying Barack Obama's latest book. Just from how on earth does one person handle such a complex set of problems? I can be saying, well, I'm a Jaguar Land Rover and I'm working across five car lines, but I'm not making life or death decisions, really. It's just in a whole nother league. But I'm sort of the opinion that if he's done it, then it's doable. It's about, can you isolate what it was about him that means that he was able to do it, and then perhaps could you embody and embrace and train some of that in yourself. that's one of the reasons I read these things, because it's obviously doable. You've just got to figure out how to do it, and that's where it's interesting for me.
Yeah, I am exactly the same. So Audible, I reckon I could probably have got a job in Audible and made some very good money, the amount of people I've recommended Audible to.
Yes.
Because I'm
Okay.
absolutely obsessed with Audible. And you know, I've got all sorts of books from business, kind of, as you said, those personal development, where they're showing you kind of techniques to make your life better, or your work better, or your business better. And then, you know, I mean, for me, I work on my own. You know, I have, you know, people who work for me, but I'm running my business up. The buck stops with me. So, you know, I don't always have like anyone to go and ask those questions to. But what I've really learned is surrounding yourself with good people as well, because you can't do it on your own. So, you know, I've got people who I've got a couple of business coaches who I dip into. My Audible, as you said, is always on. Yeah. And you know, but also personally, you know, I'm a parent and I'm learning lots of things from parenting books and business books. And you're right, you know, it's really good. Like Michelle Obama's on my Audible that I've been dipping in and dipping out of. So, you know, I think the more you know, it's all well and good to have skills, hard skills, and your soft skills that are your natural, like your curiosity, your personality, and all that kind of stuff. But in order to really improve, you've got to go wider, haven't you? You've got to kind of go broader in your approach. And I think people who constantly are improving themselves by listening and talking and, you know, getting on board help that they need in whatever capacity they need to, will always be, you know, able to progress their careers further, but also progress their lives in a more what's the word, kind of deeper and more fulfilling way, you know, both professionally and privately. I just think it's a really good thing. I'm not surprised that you do those things, Leigh, at all. I'm not surprised.
Who's your favourite out of interest?
Oh God, so I really, when you said about sports, I was going to recommend to you Andrew Silito. Have you listened to Andrew Silito?
I've not, no.
So he's into leadership, but he's also does a lot of sports leadership. His book is on Audible, but he reads it, and I would say I found it more difficult to listen to that. But I find he does like a live chat on LinkedIn, which is really good and really engaging. The other one, who's the other one? I'm reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People at the moment, which you've probably already read. I quite like, who's the other one that I quite like? I've got a list as long as your arm. There was one that I really started with, and I go back to his book all the time, and I'll send it to you via email because I can't remember his. But you know, he's one of those ones that I just keep listening to. And I'm also quite into. She's a woman that runs things for women who have money blocks, and I've been listening to her as well. And she's really good. She's Australian. I'm big into Australians at the moment. I have an Australian business coach, and I have these ladies who are on, you know, I just like their voices. I think it's that laid back, kind of slightly chilled out approach. I'm quite into. I love Audible. God, I could talk about Audible all day. I think people get sick of me talking about it. Talk to me about your award, Leigh. So you won an award recently. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was Automotive News Europe Rising Star Award. It was something that my mentor at Jaguar Land Rover, Mark Trowbridge, he's the director of the Castle Bromwich plant. He helped to support my application. It was a process that started. The application started in late 2019, and it went through a number of steps where you would write in application forms and then had interviews with the panel. And it was, I wanted to try and the award, but I wasn't too hopeful at the time because I am a relative novice in the automotive industry, because I speak to everyone I work with has been there 25 plus years. So I thought I'd have a go, but it's okay if I failed. As it turned out, my relative inexperience in the industry was actually quite useful, because I was talking perhaps in a way that the more disruptive members or companies of the automotive industry may talk, as opposed to using the jargon and the slang and the perhaps the traditional thinking in the automotive industry. So yeah, in the end, I think that's probably what sort of tipped me over. And yeah, award ceremony was supposed to be face to face, supposed to be in Belgium in July, but that didn't quite work out. But we did have a good a Zoom session, online Zoom session, and then we've had some meetings since online, and I've met a lot of good people, the other winners, because it's a tranche of people each year. So I've got a good network from it. But we've had some events that are really interesting to me, and they're interesting because what you get from it is not what you get from your day job. If I'm in charge of a bunch of projects and programs, I can find myself getting involved with the issues of those. I'm not necessarily thinking at the macro level about the trends in the industry day in, day out, but then I can attend these events, and that's the level that they're talking at, and that's brilliant for me as a point of interest, but also I think as a career development tool, so that if I'm able to keep progressing through my career, I'll have the kind of view and perspective that I'll need at the higher levels of industry, rather than it being perhaps yet another thing that you have to learn on the fly. So it's yeah, I was pleased to win the award. I'm even more pleased by the perspectives and the gateways that have opened up as a result of winning. So yeah, really pleased.
So what was the award? What was it? What was the title?
Automotive News Europe Rising Star Award 2020.
Well done you. That must be a real coup for you. So
yeah, it was,
so you've talked a lot about your career and how that's worked. What sort of advice would you give to your younger self starting out?
I definitely think having that curiosity that we've spoken about is important. If you haven't got it, then I would say ask yourself why that is, because I think the more curious you are, it's probably linked to some way about how passionate you are about a particular activity that you're involved in. And I think you don't have to have it, because you can be operating in your silo, but if you got it, then you're going to go a lot further. So really making sure as your younger self, you're asking yourself, am I curious about this? Am I passionate about this? And if I'm not, then change and do something else until you find something that you are passionate in. And I think the other bit is I didn't take enough risks and become uncomfortable in my career early enough. It wasn't until I went to JLR that and exposed myself to different industry and quite a relatively senior level. I didn't realise how comfortable I was at Atlas Copco in those other roles. So I could have been pushing a lot harder if I'd realised how difficult things can be. And finally, I think I'm just about to move to China, as you know, and I did get a fair amount of international experience at Atlas Copco and early part of Jaguar Land Rover. So I've worked in South Korea, Czech Republic, Slovakia, but they were in shorter placements, months at a time. And then back home, it's taken me to my age now before I've said, right, 3 years expat. I should have done that earlier. So I'd say to the younger version of me, go, if that opportunity comes up, take it, embrace it, and do it just as quickly as possible.
And talk to me about China. So how did that come about?
Right. So yeah, China, or the operation that we got in China is a joint venture between Chery Automobile and Jaguar Land Rover, and I applied for the role. I applied for the role to try and drive on a personal level, to try and drive that the being outside the comfort zone, but from a professional point of view, I applied because the rate at which we releasing products over there is a lot quicker. If you were to say perhaps a brand new vehicle takes 5 years start to end, then if you were involved from a project management perspective, you're only going to see that process every 5 years. So that's of course for a brand new top hat vehicle, but and it's quicker on smaller model years. But I just looked at China and said, that looks like the place for me, because I haven't got the 12, 20 years, whatever it may be, experience. That's the place I can go through this loop many times and build up my experience that I'm lacking, having only had 3 years in automotive. And as luck would have it, I made it through the interview process, and yeah, should have started, as I say, in June. That rolled on to August, into November, and all being well, January it really will start. But yeah, fingers crossed that we will have a safe Christmas, and then we'll see.
So to round off, kind of, we talked a little bit about what you'd say to your younger self, but do you have like 5 top tips if you're starting out in a project management career?
Yeah, so I'm probably going to repeat myself a little bit.
Right, repeat away.
But you definitely get the fundamentals straight with the project management qualification. Making sure you're applying your skills widely and as quickly as possible in new environments. Recognize the difference between project management and project leadership, in as much as of course you can be the person that follows the project management process, but they're probably not remembered as the best project managers. It's more about how many people did you develop along the way? What other differences did you make whilst you were doing it? Did you inspire some people? Because you're in a position where you can do that, making sure that you do it. So being clear on project management, which I would just say is following the process versus project leadership. That's 3, wasn't it? Right. I would say use the tools. If you're going to use the tools, use them very clinically and use them well. Don't half bake it. So if you're going to, with risk, with issues, with project planning, do a really good plan that's very well thought out. Don't take any shortcuts, but also recognize that there are times when you should abandon those tools and take a completely different approach, because it might make, because the business says that you have to. So do it well if you're going to do it, but if you have to pivot and do something very different, then do it. Don't be wedded to those tools. And probably finally, where next after project, program, or portfolio management, in that it's a good set of skills to have, but think about, is that the end of your career, or are you entering this industry or this part of industry forever, or where is it going to take you next? So have an exit strategy if you like it, or if that's where you want to go, or stay and just keep getting better and better if you want to. What's
your strategy, Leigh? Are you staying, or have you got an exit plan?
So I think there's perhaps a risk that I might look a bit one-dimensional in there to someone just looking at my CV. So I think I'm, as a project management person. So I think where I'd like to go next is being the person that manages the person running the portfolio of projects into more of a general management, operational manager role, something with day-to-day accountability for targets and profit and loss, or whatever that it may be. And I think the skills, the apprenticeship, let's call it, in project management will serve me well in that role.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for all your information. Is there anything you'd like to add, like an off the cuff kind of, without me asking you questions? Anything you'd like to add?
No, it's a pleasure talking about these things, because I find it fascinating. I certainly agree with your comment about some of the skills that you learn at work can start to pay dividends in your life as well, around dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity, and dealing with people. So I try not to see them as different things. If you get better in one, you're probably better at the other. So I'm more than happy to be talking about this kind of thing. And if anyone that's watching has got any questions, then feel free to get in touch with me.
Thank you, Leigh. That's really kind as well, because you've got I think you've really tackled your career in although you say you wish you'd made different, maybe more risky decisions earlier on, where you're at now is incredible, and you've done really well in your career. And I think anyone listening to what we've talked about will be really impressed. So thank you so much for spending some of your time. I know your time's precious and you're a busy man. So thank you very much for chatting to me. And obviously I will pass on your details if there's anyone that comes back to me and says, and you're on LinkedIn, aren't you? So yeah, the world is your oyster.